The bridge of the Galactic Consensus Command Ship Judgment of Terran was a cathedral of quiet light and humming energy. Commander Park stood at its center, his hands clasped behind his back, studying the three-dimensional star map. His reflection, sharp and severe in his gray uniform, was superimposed over the swirling galactic arm. His focus was on a single, unremarkable yellow star. "Final verification," he said, his voice calm. To his right, Sub-Commander Ji-yoon scanned her console. Her face, usually a mask of composed efficiency, showed a faint line of tension between her brows. "Confirmed, Commander. System catalogued as Sol. Third planetary body is the target. Designation: Terra. Local species calls itself humanity." The data streamed across secondary screens for the bridge crew to see. Park observed the readouts with cold, clinical detachment. Planet classification: 15D, a Deathworld of the highest order. The numbers told a story of a cosmic torture chamber. Atmospheric composition included reactive oxygen at dangerously high levels. Gravity well, 0.9 standard, but with extreme local variances. Tectonic activity, hyperactive. Biological analysis, off the scale. The planet's biosphere was a riot of predatory, venomous and toxic life, all engaged in a perpetual, violent competition. "A garden of nightmares," murmured Tactical Officer Day, his four-fingered hand hovering over his weapons panel. "It is not a garden," Park corrected softly, without turning. "It is an open wound in the universe, and the infection has developed sentience." They broadcast their location on primitive electromagnetic waves. "They are a chaos vector, a threat to the ordered consensus." The doctrine was clear, etched into the history of 100 purged worlds. Life that arose on a death world was inherently aggressive, expansionist, and unstable. It could not be reasoned with. It could not be integrated. The only safe death world was a silent one. The consensus had perfected the art of planetary sterilization from orbit. Clean, surgical, final. "The fleet is in position," Ji-yoon reported. 1,000 ships, a tapestry of silver and blue against the black, arranged themselves in a complex geometric formation around the vibrant blue marble. Orbital defenses are negligible. Primitive kinetic platforms and a handful of armed orbital stations. No sign of planetary energy shielding. No fleet signature beyond low-orbit shuttles. Park gave a slow, single nod. It was as expected. A young, loud species, screaming into the void without any understanding of what might be listening. They had stumbled out of their cradle and onto a galactic stage where they were not players, but a problem to be solved. "Open a channel to all vessels," Park commanded. His voice filled the networked bridges of the Armada. "This is Commander Park of the Consensus Vanguard. By the authority of the Galactic Consensus, and under Directive Omega regarding Class 15 Death Worlds, we are enacting a planetary sterilization protocol. The native species is deemed irredeemably feral and a threat to galactic stability. May order be restored." He closed the channel. There was no need to communicate with the humans. This was not a war. It was an extermination. "Primary lance is charged and targeted," Day announced, his voice gaining a hard edge. The main weapon of the Judgment of Terran was a marvel of physics, a cannon that could channel the energy of a small star into a single, continent-cracking beam. It was always the first tool, designed to shatter the planet's crust and trigger massive volcanic responses. "Beginning the cleansing process. Authorization is given," Park said. On the main viewer, the planet turned slowly, peacefully. Clouds swirled over vast blue oceans. The green and brown of the land masses were clear. It looked fragile. A beam of pure, white energy, thicker than a mountain, lanced out from the command ship. It crossed the distance between the fleet and the planet in a heartbeat. Park watched, awaiting the brilliant flash of light. The spreading firestorm, the first sign of the world's death throes. It did not come. Instead, at the last possible moment, a pattern of shimmering, honeycomb-like hexagons flickered across the planet's atmosphere. They were the color of pale gold, barely visible. The apocalyptic beam struck this field and did not explode. It splashed across it like water hitting an invisible dome, spreading out in a spectacular but harmless cascade of dissolving energy. In seconds, the beam sputtered and died. The hexagons faded. The planet below was untouched. Not a single city was scorched. Not a single ocean boiled. Silence, heavy and complete, swallowed the bridge of the judgment of Terran. Alarms began to shriek a moment later. Ji-Eun's hands flew over her console, her eyes wide with disbelief. Energy diffusion at 100%. No impact. No thermal spike on the surface. The beam was absorbed and dissipated. Impossible, Day shouted, slamming a fist on his panel. Scans showed no shield technology. No power signature capable of that. Park said nothing. He stared at the planet, which continued its serene rotation as if nothing had happened. His mind, trained for 100 battles across the galaxy, scrambled. This was not in the doctrine. Deathworlds were violent, but they were not technologically advanced. Their species were too busy surviving their own environment to master hyperphysics. Then, a new voice filled the comm system. It was calm, clear, and translated perfectly into their language. It held no fear, no anger. It was the tone of a traffic controller noting a minor violation. Unidentified fleet. You have initiated hostilities against the Terran consensus. You have directed a weapon of mass destruction at a populated world. This is a violation of the Sol System's sovereignty. Act. Cease fire immediately and withdraw beyond the orbit of the celestial body you designate Jupiter. Await further instructions. The message repeated once, then the channel remained open, silent. The bridge crew looked to their commander. Ji-Eun's face had paled. "Sir," she whispered, the word barely audible over the hum of the ship. "They're polite." Park finally turned from the viewer. The calm on his face was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. The clinical detachment had evaporated. This was no longer a sterilization. It was a confrontation. "They have hidden their capabilities," he stated, his mind racing through possibilities. "A masking technology we could not detect. They allowed us to believe they were primitive. It is a trap. A Deathworld trap." He straightened his uniform. The shock was passing, replaced by the instincts of a soldier. The first move had failed. The enemy had revealed a formidable, unexpected defense. The rules had changed. Recall the lance energy. Retune to secondary frequencies, he ordered Day, his voice iron. This changes nothing of the objective. It only changes the method. If we cannot burn them from orbit, we will scorch them from the ground. Prepare the Krulter drop battalions. We will send in the shock troops. Let us see how their polite shields hold up when our boots are in their dirt. He looked back at the planet, no longer seeing a fragile marble, but a hardened nut that required a sharper crack. The humans had surprised him. It was a mistake they would not live to repeat. The galactic consensus did not fail. It merely adapted its tools. But as he gave the orders, a sliver of the calm, translated human voice echoed in his mind. It had not been the voice of a panicked prey, nor the roar of a defiant predator. It had been the voice of an administrator. And in Park's long experience, administrators only spoke with that tone of detached authority when they were utterly, completely in control. The failure of the orbital lance was a sting, a public humiliation for the fleet. Commander Park's orders were swift and decisive. The consensus would not be mocked by a Deathworld. If the planet had a shell, they would crack it from the inside. The chosen method: a ground assault on a major population center. The chosen instrument: the Krelter. The Krelter were the consensus's scalpel. Born on a high-gravity world, they stood 8 feet tall, their bodies dense with muscle beneath chitinous natural armor, augmented further by powered combat suits. Their reputation was legendary. They had pacified rebel systems, broken fortified citadels, and cleansed habitats. They felt no fear, only a cold drive for efficient completion of their objective. The target was a coastal city named Sydney. Intelligence, gleaned from intercepted broadcasts, showed it was a hub of activity. Millions of humans lived there. It was perfect. The Krelter dropped pods, hundreds of them, streaked through the atmosphere like meteors, bypassing the mysterious planetary shield without resistance. They crashed into parks, onto streets, on the shores of the wide harbor. The operation was flawless. The Krelter commander, a veteran named Gore, emerged from his pod, his heavy boots crushing the concrete of a circular pedestrian concourse. Around him, his battalion formed up with mechanical precision. The humans in the area did not react as expected. There was no screaming panic, no immediate rush to flee. They stopped and stared. Some raised small devices, pointing them at the alien warriors. Gore interpreted this as a potential weapon scan. He activated his external speaker. "People of Terra," his voice boomed, translated by his suit. "This settlement is under the control of the galactic consensus. Lay down your arms and surrender. Resistance will be met with lethal force. You have 1 standard minute to comply." The humans looked at each other. A few began to slowly back away. Most just kept watching, their expressions more curious than terrified. Gore felt a flicker of annoyance. This was not the correct response. His tactical display showed no energy weapon signatures, no organized military response. Just the vague biosigns of the unarmed populace, and 2 approaching signals from a nearby street, one on foot, one stationary on a low rooftop. They were not even moving with urgency. From the street, a single human walked into the open. He was male, of average height, dressed in a dark blue uniform, with a silver badge on his chest and a strange, rigid hat. He carried no visible weapon. He held up a hand, palm out. "All right, settle down," the human said. His suit translator rendered his tone as mildly exasperated. "I'm Constable Min Su. You're causing a public disturbance and unlawful entry. You and all your friends here need to put those noisy things down and come with me, please." Gore stared. The human was speaking to him like he was a disorderly youth, not a galactic shock trooper. The insult was profound. "You are in violation of consensus law," Gore boomed back. "You will surrender. Mate, you're the one violating about 17 sections of the Terran Sovereignty and Public Nuisance Acts," Min Su said, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. "Now, I'm going to need names, but I doubt I can spell them. Let's start with you all leaving peacefully." Gore had endured enough. This was a waste of time. He raised his plasma caster, aimed at the human's chest, and fired. What happened next was a blur to Gore's advanced sensors. One moment, the human constable was standing 10 feet away. The next, he was not where the plasma bolt hit. He had sidestepped with a speed that seemed impossible for an unenhanced biped. The bolt scorched the pavement where he had been. Min Su sighed, a sound of pure professional annoyance. "Right, assault on a peace officer. That's a mandatory court date." Gore fired again, a rapid burst. Min Su didn't run away. He moved in. He ducked under one bolt, his body coiling, and then sprang forward. To Gore, it was like being hit by a small vehicle. Min Su's shoulder drove into Gore's midsection, not to hurt the armor, but to unbalance him. A hand slapped against the wrist of Gore's weapon arm. There was a twist, a precise application of pressure on a joint not designed for that angle. A sickening crack echoed, not from Minsu, but from Gore's own fortified bone. The plasma caster clattered to the ground. Gore roared, swinging his other arm, a blow that could crush rock. Minsu flowed with the motion, grabbing the arm, using Gore's own momentum, and with a grunt of effort, executed a perfect hip throw. The 8-foot-tall, half-ton Krelter commander was lifted off his feet and slammed onto the pavement with a thunderous crash that cracked the concrete. The impact knocked the air from Gore's lungs and scrambled his sensors. From the rooftop, the second human signal made her move. Sergeant HFY lay prone, her cheek resting against the stock of a long precision rifle. It was a ballistic weapon, a technology the consensus considered archaic. Through her scope, she watched the other Krelter soldiers, now reacting to their commander's fall. They raised their weapons, looking for a target. Targets acquired. Non-lethal disablement authorized, she murmured into her comms, her voice calm as a morning weather report. She exhaled slowly, her finger taking up the slack on the trigger. Crack. A round struck a Krelter's plasma caster. Not the housing, but the tiny gap between the energy cell and the barrel coupling. The weapon sparked and died. Crack. Another round hit the knee joint of a second warrior, not piercing the armor, but jamming the servos with the impact. The Krelter stumbled. Crack. A third shot hit a soldier's external sensor cluster, blinding him. It was systematic, methodical dismantling. HFY wasn't trying to kill them. She was disarming and confusing them, one precise shot at a time. On the ground, Minsu was a whirlwind of efficient motion. He was not stronger than the Krelter. He was better. He used their weight and momentum against them. A pressure point here, a joint lock there, a sweeping kick to a leg at just the right time. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of a lifetime of training, not for war, but for control. He wasn't fighting to destroy. He was fighting to restrain. Within minutes, the concourse was a scene of bewildering defeat. Dozens of the galaxy's most fearsome shock troops were lying on the ground, groaning, their weapons disabled or removed, their armor intact, but their pride shattered. Some were handcuffed with heavy-duty plastic ties. Minsu was breathing heavily, adjusting his hat, which had been knocked slightly crooked. Soon, other humans arrived. They wore similar blue uniforms or green uniforms. They brought wheeled stretchers and boxes of supplies. They checked the dazed Krelter for injuries, offering them sips of water from bottles, placing basic bandages on scratches. They spoke in calm, procedural tones. "All right, big fella, let's get you sat up. You might have a concussion. Does this hurt? Can you move your fingers? We're going to transport you to a holding facility for processing. Please remain calm." On the command ship, Commander Park and Sub-Commander Ji-un watched the live feed in stunned silence. They had expected a brutal, swift conquest. They had expected to see humans running, dying, begging for mercy. They had expected to see the Krelter standing victorious over smoldering ruins. Instead, they saw their elite warriors being treated like unruly festival-goers by a single unarmored man and a hidden sniper. They saw them being given medical aid and water by their captors. The feed showed no hatred on the human faces, only a sort of busy, professional resolve. The channel from the surface crackled to life. It was Constable Minsu, his voice slightly breathless. "Central, this is Unit 7. We have, a situation contained at the key. Multiple foreign nationals, heavily armed, now in custody. Requesting multiple transport vans and a linguistic specialist. Also send a building inspector." One of them went through a wall. "Over." A dispatcher's voice replied, crisp and clear. "Copy, Unit 7. Transport and LS en route. 8 minutes. Good work." Try to keep the property damage down this time. The channel closed. For a long moment, the only sound on the bridge was the low hum of the ship's systems. Ji-eun finally found her voice. It was a bare whisper, filled with a dawning, horrible understanding. "Sir?" "They don't fight like soldiers," she said, her eyes glued to the screen, where a human medic was checking a Krelter's pulse. "They fight like mechanics. Or engineers. Fixing a broken situation. Efficient. Clean. No anger. No glory." Park said nothing. He watched a human help a stumbling Krelter into a large, white vehicle with a flashing light on top. The plasma scorch on the pavement was the only evidence a battle had even occurred. The sterilization of Sydney had not failed. It had been processed, filed, and utterly, completely neutralized. The humiliation in Sydney was a deep, quiet wound in the fleet's confidence. Commander Park reviewed the footage again and again. The humans had not used overwhelming force. They had used something worse. Perfect, effortless efficiency. It suggested a level of skill born from a reality he could not yet grasp. "We cannot engage their population centers directly," he stated in the strategy meeting. The holographic table displayed the twisting, brutal mountain ranges of a region called the Himalayas. "Their civil structures are too integrated, their response too procedural. We need an isolated target. A scientific outpost. We will seize it, acquire their data, and understand the shield technology. And we will do it in an environment that should favor us." The target was high-altitude research station Everest V, clinging to a icy ridge. Consensus sensors classified the environment as extreme hazard. Lethal. Low oxygen, temperatures that could freeze plasma conduits. Sudden, violent storms. And unpredictable gravity shears caused by the planet's dense, uneven crust. It was the kind of place only machines or the most desperate beings would inhabit. A specialized Krelter company was deployed. Their armor was upgraded with extra thermal regulation and oxygen recyclers. They were experts in hostile environment operations. Their dropship fought against screaming winds to land on a precarious ledge 500 meters below the station. The humans, scans showed, had only a few life signs inside. The Krelter squad leader, Verk, led his team up the sheer ice face with magnetized grips. The wind howled, a physical force that tried to pry them from the rock. The cold seeped even through their insulated plates. It was brutal, but it was the kind of challenge the Krelter were bred for. They reached the station's outer platform. A metal deck dusted with snowdot, one human was outside. He was bundled in a thick red and blue padded suit, his face barely visible behind goggles and a frost-rimed breather mask. He was hammering a bent support strut on a weather sensor array, seemingly oblivious to the deadly storm. A light on his wrist glowed, projecting a data readout onto his goggles. Verk motioned, and his squad fanned out, weapons raised. The crunch of their boots on the compacted snow finally made the human look up. He pushed his goggles up onto his forehead, revealing a young, tired face. He didn't look afraid. He looked inconvenienced. "Can I help you?" The human called out, his voice snatched by the wind. His translator unit picked it up. "You're kinda in a restricted area. You will surrender this facility," Verk commanded, his voice amplified. "You will provide access to all data cores." The human, researcher Teho, squinted at them. He looked from one hulking, armored form to another, then down at the scanner on his wrist. He shook his head. "You really shouldn't be up here. Your suits aren't rated for this. Your density is all wrong." Verk took a step forward, the deck plating groaning under his weight. "Our specifications are beyond your comprehension. Do not resist." Teho sighed, a puff of vapor in the freezing air. "It's not about specs. It's about design. Look, your cardiovascular system is hemispheric, right? 2 separate pumps for upper and lower body, efficient for standard gravity, terrible for high G variance or shear. This ridge sits on a massive tectonic plate boundary. The gravity here isn't a constant. It's a suggestion. He was speaking like a lecturer to slow students. Verk felt his anger rising, a hot contrast to the cold. He raised his plasma rifle. Final warning, surrender. At that moment, the gravity shear hit Dot to Teho. It was a sudden, heavy wave. He grunted, dropping to one knee, his hand gripping the sensor array for support. The world seemed to press down for a second. Then the pressure lifted. He took a deep, ragged breath. See? Told you. For the Krulter, it was a cataclysm. A sudden, localized spike in gravity didn't just push down on them. It attacked the fundamental flaw Teho had just described. Their sophisticated, hemispheric circulatory systems went into chaos. The 2 pumps tried to compensate for the drastic shift in pressure differentials between the upper and lower body. They fell out of sync. Internal fluids sloshed violently, crashing into walls of tissue and organ. Neural signals misfired. Verk screamed. It was a short, wet sound. He dropped his weapon, clutching his chest plate. Around him, his squad collapsed. They weren't crushed by external weight. They were being torn apart from the inside. Armor servos whined and locked. Biomonitors on their suits flashed catastrophic red. One warrior vomited a thick, dark fluid that froze instantly on the deck. Teho got to his feet, wincing. He looked at the writhing forms with a frown of professional concern, not victory. He tapped the cum on his wrist. Base, this is Teho. We've got a situation. Tourist group, the big armored kind, ignored all the warning signs. A big shear just hit. They're in a bad way. A crackly female voice, the Jinn, replied. Again? Didn't we put up bigger signs after the last ones? Do you need the paramedic drone? Yeah, send it. And a cargo sled. I think a few of them aren't going to make it. Systemic collapse. It's messy. He walked over to Verk, who was gasping, his eyes wide with agony and terror behind his visor. Teho knelt, ignoring the weapon nearby. He scanned the alien suit with his wrist device, reading the frantic biometrics. Hemispheric cardiac arrest. Yeah, that's what I thought. Sorry, big guy. This is a really stupid place for you to be. The medical drone, a small, buzzing thing with manipulator arms, zipped out of a hatch. It went to the nearest fallen Krulter, injecting stabilizing compounds through a needle designed to find suit ports. It was methodical, triaging the aliens based on the severity of their internal injuries. Teho helped where he could, rolling one heavy soldier onto his side to prevent choking. On the command ship, the feed from Verk's helmet camera was a jumbled nightmare of screaming alarms, a tilted view of gray sky, and the concerned face of a human researcher. Then the feed went dark, followed by the others, one by one. The last data packet was a medical scan from the human's own device, highlighting the fatal flaw in Krulter biology. Annotated in simple human script, gravity shear susceptibility, design fault. Commander Park stood like a statue. The silence on the bridge was absolute. They had chosen the environment specifically for its harshness, believing it would negate the human numerical or logistical advantage. They had thought it would be a neutralizer. Instead, the environment itself had been the humans' ally. No, not an ally. It was their home. The human had not attacked. He had simply been present and had understood the rules of the place in a way the invaders never could. He had known they would break, and he had watched it happen. With the sad resignation of a man seeing a car crash, he predicted .G-EUN spoke, her voice hollow. They don't conquer their Deathworld, Commander. They don't fight it. They understand it. They know its moods. They know where to stand when it has a tantrum. She looked at the frozen image of Tae-ho, trying to stem a Krelter's internal bleeding. We brought soldiers to a place where the only survival tools are knowledge and patience. And we brought the wrong tools. Park finally turned away from the viewer. The cold certainty that had driven him was now chilling him in a different way. The humans weren't just hidden behind a shield. They were woven into the very fabric of their lethal planet. To attack them on the ground was to attack the ground itself, and the ground here was an active, murderous participant. The Himalayan operation had not been a military defeat. It had been a lesson in planetary science, taught by a tired graduate student, and the tuition had been paid in Krelter blood. The command ship felt different now. The quiet hum of machinery was the same, but the mood had shifted. It was no longer the calm before a victorious purge. It was the tense silence of a puzzle that refused to be solved. Commander Park stared at the tactical hologram of Earth, his mind discarding options one by one. Physical assault was a failure. The environment was an enemy. The humans were polite, efficient, and utterly in control in ways he could not define. We must target the source of their resilience, he announced to his subdued senior staff. Their biology. They are products of a toxic, predatory biosphere. We will attack that bond. The plan was a masterpiece of consensus biotechnology. A nanophage. Microscopic machines programmed to seek out and disassemble complex carbon-based chains, the building blocks of Earth life. They would be released over a vast, dense, and vital region of the planet, a place labeled the Amazon Basin. The theory was elegant. The phage would multiply exponentially, consuming all organic matter, reducing the lush forest and any humans within it to a sterile gray slurry in a matter of hours. It would be a demonstration. The humans would watch a part of their world die, and they would understand the futility of resistance. The phage was undetectable to primitive sensors, and unstoppable by any known means. The delivery vessel, a small stealthy drone, slipped through the atmosphere and released its payload over the endless green sea of the rainforest. A glittering, invisible cloud descended into the canopy. On the command ship, Park and his officers watched the thermal and biosignature displays, waiting for the wave of gray death to spread. For the first minute, nothing, then another. The dense biosigns of the forest continued their chaotic, vibrant pulse. No change. Perhaps there is a latency period, the science officer suggested, his voice unsure. They waited for an hour. The rainforest hummed with life. Birds called. Insects buzzed. Nothing turned to slurry. Deep in the understory, a young ecologist named Ji Hyeon was taking samples. She wore simple khaki clothing and carried a handheld scanner. She was studying a particular epiphyte, a fern that grew on the side of a giant kapok tree. Her scanner beeped, noting an unusual metallic residue on the fern's fronds. She leaned in, peering closely. "Huh," she murmured to herself. "Interesting. Particulate adhesion on the trichomes." She gently scraped a few of the tiny, glittering specks onto a glass slide. Probably atmospheric deposition from the industrial reclamation projects up north. Or maybe another round of those experimental cloud-seeding minerals. She labeled the slide and placed it in her case. The nanites, designed to eat her cells, were instead stuck to the fern's tiny hairs, immobilized by a natural, sticky sap the plant used to trap insects. A few meters away, a different type of nanite encountered a common rainforest mold. The mold, in its endless battle for resources, perceived the nanite as a foreign invader and unleashed a barrage of enzymes to break it down. The phage's programming had no defense against a fungal digestive process older than humanity. Elsewhere, trillions of the nanites simply died. They landed on leaves coated in natural insecticides, on bark full of tannins, in water filled with organic acids. The Amazon was not a passive recipient of an attack. It was a simmering, hyper-competitive chemical battleground, where every plant, fungus, and bacterium was armed to the teeth in a silent war of survival. The nanophage was just another competitor, and a particularly fragile one. It had been engineered for a sterile, predictable ecosystem. It was not prepared for a place where the air itself could be corrosive, and the rainwater could dissolve certain alloys. The final blow was delivered by Earth's own microscopic fauna. A type of bacteriophage, a virus that attacks bacteria, encountered the alien nanites. Its simple ancient programming identified the nanite's carbon shell as a potential host. It attached, injected its genetic material, and hijacked the nanite's own replication function. Instead of building more nanites, the dying machines began producing copies of the Earth virus until they burst, releasing a cloud of terrestrial phage that then attacked other nanites within 3 hours. The entire payload was neutralized, not by human technology, but by the baseline defensive and offensive systems of the rainforest itself. The only trace was the faint, metallic dust Jihain had collected, which she would later log in a regional environmental database as a minor, curious piece of pollutant data. File number A227 Omega. On the bridge, the science officer was pale, his hands trembling as he read the final scan reports. The nanophage. It's gone, Commander. Not deactivated by a countersignal. Not contained. It has been broken down. The constituent molecules are being incorporated into the local biomass as inert material. The rainforest. It digested it. Park felt a cold void opening in his chest. How? Explain the mechanism. There is no single mechanism. The officer cried, his professional composure breaking. It was a cascade. Plant resins, fungal enzymes, microbial activity, local viral agents. Commander, the planetary biosphere treated our most advanced bioweapon as an infestation, and it cleared it, routinely. The humans didn't even have to lift a finger. Ji-Yoon was looking at the live visual feed from the Amazon canopy. It showed dappled sunlight, green leaves, a monkey scratching its head. It was the picture of serene, untouched life. "They're microbes," she whispered, the realization settling like a lead weight. "They're molds and ferns one. We are not fighting an army, Commander. We are not even fighting the humans directly. We are fighting a biome, and we are losing to the background noise." Park turned from the hologram. The logic was inescapable and horrifying. Every tool they used was being turned aside not by human ingenuity, but by the normal, everyday functions of a Deathworld. The planet itself was rejecting them like a body rejects a weak pathogen. The shield, the gravity, the biosphere, they were not human inventions. They were the natural conditions of Earth. The humans had merely evolved to live within them, to navigate them. Their technology was an extension of that navigation. He had come to sterilize a feral world. He was instead learning that the world was so inherently lethal, so fiercely alive and defensive, that his entire arsenal was barely a mild irritation. The nanophage attack had not been a battle. It had been an offering to the jungle, and the jungle had consumed it without a second thought. The humans, the supposed target, hadn't even noticed. The doom he had come to bring was not a doom he could deliver. It was a doom he was beginning to feel pressing in on his own fleet, a silent, green, and utterly indifferent doom. The bridge of the Judgment of Terran was a tomb. The air was thick with the silence of broken purpose. Commander Park stood before the main viewer, his hands flat on the cold console, his gaze fixed on Earth. It was no longer a target. It was a riddle that had solved them. The orbital shield, the efficient police, the murderous gravity, the voracious biosphere, each was a facet of a single terrible truth. They were out of their depth in a universe far more hostile than they had ever known. A new alert pulsed, softer than the battle sirens before. It was a solar weather warning. Their star, Sol, was entering a period of increased activity. A common predictable flare event was building. To a spacefaring species, it was routine, a minor navigation hazard, a reason to adjust shield harmonics. Park's science officer dismissed it with a tired wave. A standard coronal mass ejection. Our shielding is more than adequate, Commander. It is the least of our concerns. The least of their concerns became their only concern. As the fleet, demoralized and directionless, held its position, the solar flare erupted. A wave of radiation and energized particles, massive and furious, rushed out from the sun. It was a natural phenomenon, a storm of raw stellar fury. The consensus shields activated automatically, tuned to deflect cosmic radiation and particle weapons. But Earth's sun was not a consensus star, and the flare interacted with the fleet's shield harmonics in a way no one had predicted. An interaction that had never been tested because no one had ever fought a battle in this particular slice of space. The frequency of the flare's energy pulse created a resonant feedback loop within the shield generators. On the bridge, the first sign was a high-pitched whine from the power core. Then the lights flickered. A console exploded in a shower of sparks, throwing an officer to the floor. Across the fleet, on 100 ships, the same event unfolded. Shield emitters overloaded, not from external attack, but from an internal cascade failure triggered by a natural solar event. Energy conduits melted. Life support systems stuttered and failed. The great ships didn't explode. They went dark and silent, adrift in the sudden quiet, their power systems crippled by the sun's tantrum. The judgment of Terran was dead in the water. Emergency lights cast long, grim shadows. Park pulled himself up from the deck, a cut on his forehead bleeding. He looked at the chaos, at Ji-yoon struggling to bring auxiliary power online. It was over. Not with a glorious last stand, but with a whimper caused by a star they had ignored. A proximity alert chimed weakly. A small, unarmed human shuttle was approaching. It docked with the flagship's emergency port, with a gentle thud no one on the bridge had authorized. They were too broken to stop it. The door to the bridge slid open. A single human walked in. She was a woman of middle years, dressed in a simple, dark suit. She carried no weapon, only a small data crystal. Her name was Su Min. She looked at the wounded, the smoke, the despair, and her face showed no triumph. Only a deep, weary pity. She walked to the central console and placed the crystal down. It glowed, projecting a simple menu in their language. "This is a survival guide," she said, her voice quiet in the ruined room. "Basic Terran environmental navigation. How to identify potable water sources. How to avoid poisonous plants and venomous animals. First aid for common biological and environmental hazards. Gravity acclimation exercises for your physiology." Commander Park stared at her, his mind unable to process this. You come to gloat? To claim your victory?" Su Min turned to him, her eyes clear and calm. "There is no victory to claim, Commander. You were never our enemy. You were visitors who ignored all the warning signs. You saw a Deathworld and thought, threat to be eliminated. You never saw a home to be survived. You charged into a realm where every day, the wind, the rain, the gravity, the plants, the tiniest microbes, all of it, has been trying to kill us since we first stood on 2 feet. We had no choice but to become resilient, to learn cooperation, to study, to understand, to adapt, to build shelters not just against the weather, but against the very air and soil. You only learned how to build bigger guns." She gestured to the viewer, where Earth hung, whole and bright. Our shield was not a weapon. It is a weather satellite network designed to manage solar radiation and atmospheric pressure. Our response in Sydney was not a military operation. It is our standard procedure for managing public hazards. The researcher in the mountains was doing his job. The forest did what it always does. It defended itself. You confused our survival for war. Park's legs felt weak. He leaned against his chair. The humiliation was complete, but it was not the hot shame of defeat. It was the cold, hollow feeling of absolute irrelevance. "We followed the doctrine," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Class 15 Deathworld. Purge the feral species." Su Min nodded slowly. "I know. And in doing so, you answered a question we have wondered about for generations. Could we survive the attention of a truly advanced, hostile galaxy? You have shown us that we already do. Every single day. You were just louder about it than our own hurricanes." She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at the broken commander and his crew. "You asked, in your first attack, for us to surrender. I will give you the only terms we can offer. The data on that crystal will help you survive if you are stranded here. Use it or don't. The environment will not care either way. That is the lesson of a death world. It is indifferent. We are not. We learned compassion because we needed it to survive each other. So we offer you the manual. Good luck, Commander." She left. The bridge was silent again, but the silence was different now. It was filled with the heavy weight of understanding. G-Eun finally spoke, her eyes on the data crystal's soft glow. "How could we have ever thought to assault a Class 15 death world?" It was not a question to Park. It was a confession to the universe. Park did not answer. He looked at the planet below, not with the gaze of a conqueror, but with the awe of a spectator who has just seen a mountain he thought was a molehill. They had come to bring doom. They had instead found a people who had made an art form of defying it, a people who were polite not because they were weak, but because they reserved their strength for the real enemy, their own world. And in that contest, they had become something unbreakable. The humans' final words echoed, "The environment will not care." That was the true horror, the final understanding of their doom. They had not been defeated. They had been assessed by the planet itself and found too fragile to even register as a threat. Their doom was not annihilation. It was obscurity.